G'day, my name is Trevor Young and welcome to Earn the Right. Now there's an earned media strategy, and earn is going to be the word of this episode. There's an earned media strategy that has been in operation for some years, but in a world drowning in AI generated content, it's becoming, I think, one of the most powerful things a credible expert or a leader can put into action. And I'm talking about podcast guesting as a way to build your authority and grow your presence online. My special guest today has built an entire business around this idea, and he's placed hundreds and hundreds of experts in front of exactly the right audiences. Tom Schwab is the founder of Interview Valet, the pioneer of podcast interview marketing, and I think what he has to say is going to reshape how you think about how you might go about building some visibility in the marketplace by appearing on other people's podcasts. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Trevor, I am thrilled to be here, and I think you're very nice to call it AI content. The more I get it, I'm calling it AI slop from the standpoint of the robocall that I get, the text that I get, the email that I get. I just want proof of life. Show me that it's someone that's real.
Exactly. And you're talking about as being you also host a podcast. Tell us a bit about that as well.
I host the Podcast Interview Marketing Show. It says exactly what it is. And we've been doing this for 11 years. And after about 8 years of guesting, my team finally said, why don't we have our own podcast? And we use it really just to answer the frequently asked questions. So it's not an either or. Should I be a guest or a host? I think there's a point for being both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had the pleasure of being on your show earlier in the year, we had a great talk then. We'll have a great talk now. And the other thing, you've written a book as well. So you're doing all the things. You've done the book and you got the podcast about podcast guesting. We're getting very meta here, of course, and that's what you run, a podcast guesting agency.
Yes, and it's really just, this idea of, I'm an engineer by degree, right? I'm big fan of, automation and everything like this, but this idea of you're one funnel away, I reject that, right? We're all one conversation away, and you can have those conversations over books, over podcasts, over video, but I think the great things in life come through conversations, and with business especially, right? Your best new client, your best new partner, your best new team member is going to come through a conversation.
Yeah. Let's just for a bit of context, just tell us a little bit about Interview Valet, what you're doing so listeners can get a handle on there's a service like this out there, and the types of podcasts you deal with and the types of clients you have, just to set the scene.
I want to go way back. Where did we first meet? It was through inbound marketing, right? Years and years ago. And when I explain what podcast interview marketing is, it's basically what we were doing 20 years ago with guest blogs. This idea, tap into an existing audience, get that transfer of trust, get that know, like, and trust, and move people from being, a passive listener to an active visitor and engaged lead. So in some ways, we're guest blogging on podcasts today, and Interview Valet has helped people do that for the last 11 years. And when you say, well, what kind of people? Well, I really think it's people that can grow their business through conversations, right?
Yep.
The people that say, when I talk to someone, I get business. It's not a transaction, it's a relationship. So a lot of times this is professional services, it's B2B sales, it's higher ticket items than just selling something off of a Facebook ad. And I think if you look at the best people that we look at or benchmark against, right? If you're a professional services business, what do you benchmark against? Are you benchmarking against, Ernst & Young and Bain Capital and all the other ones there? Well, they have conferences, they talk, they put their thought leaders out there. They know that they start conversations and it works for them. Too many people are trying to say, well, I'm going to sell it just like somebody sells a Facebook ad for, a $9 widget. Well, that doesn't necessarily scale up to major engagements, tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we work with a lot of, coaches, consultants, a lot of nonfiction authors where there's a business behind the book also. And the whole idea is to get them in the audiences and in the rooms where their ideal buyers are, right? They know that if they get introduced by the host, there's that transfer of authority. They get to explain their point of view, what makes them different, how they see the world. And people will either turn them up or turn them off, right? The idea is that you want to attract the right clients and repel the wrong ones, right? Too many people think that content, and especially podcasts, is a megaphone. I reject that, right? Megaphones just make more noise. It should be a magnet, right? It should attract the right people and repel those that you can't serve.
And we don't need any more noise, that is for sure. And again, just to continue the context setting, in terms of podcasting, so you've been running the business for 11 years. What changes have you seen across that time in terms of podcasting? What's your view of the podcast world at the moment? Is it continuing to grow? Is it splintering off? Are there more podcasters than ever before? What are you seeing out there?
I am amazed here in 2026 that we still call it podcasting.
Yeah, true.
Right. I mean, that refers to the iPod, and half the people right now are searching what is an iPod. That's where it came from. Really, now it is on-demand media, right? Because right now, 96% of podcasts have video. Right? It started out as an audio only. They say Joe Rogan gets heard by 100 million people. Well, the thing is he only gets 2.5 million downloads per episode. The other 98 million are listening to a clip or a short of his interview. Now, is that a podcast? Sure, right? Podcasts now they've got the transcripts. They're indexed by AI. There's no doubt on that today. So to me, it's just this medium where it's super easy to create in the way that's easiest for you, and then incredibly easy to repurpose into ways that is available for other people. So I think podcasting is starting to merge, and it's almost like on-demand media that you can watch when you want, where you want, how you want, right? You can watch podcasts on YouTube. Netflix has them on now. Prime Video has podcasts. It's almost like new media, right? And it's a great time because it's got so much more impact than it did 20-some years ago when you had to buy an iPod and you had to know how to plug it in and download it.
I did my first podcast, I think it was in 2009 or 2010 or something. I don't even know how I did it. I seriously don't even know how I did it. Today we have the tools and the equipment to do it. And, I record this on Riverside, which is one way of doing it. Some people do it on Zoom, others do it face-to-face. There are different ways of doing it. But it's if podcasting's something you're interested in, it's never been easier to get going. But, of course, it's still difficult to keep it running on a long-term consistent basis. And of course, recently Apple have, I believe, announced that they're doing video as well.
They are.
So that will change the video side of things. And, I'm on Substack, and Substack have podcasts as well. So you're right, it is on-demand content, and it's all the lines are blurring between all the different modalities. So that's what makes it exciting, I think.
I think too many people focus on the technology as opposed to the art, right? The technology has gotten easier than anything, but too many people are like, well, what platform to use? What's the best microphone? That's like asking Michelangelo, what kind of paintbrushes do you use? Right? Because if I use that same paintbrush, I could be an artist too. And I think today it's more the tools can amplify us. They can amplify your brilliance or amplify your lack of strategy. So often I will start with people and they say, I want to do a podcast. Why? Right? Let's start with the why. Who do you want to talk to? What do you want to do? The same thing with podcasting really goes with any content and to share your passions.
That's it. That's it. So let's get into the meat of it. Now we've set the scene and podcast guesting. So in terms of when we say podcast guesting, let's go strip it right back. We're talking about proactively seeking out opportunities to be a guest on other people's podcasts versus just sitting back and waiting for them to roll in. If that happens, that's nice. But we're talking about a more proactive strategy.
And I would even take it one step further than that, because I hear so many people say podcast guesting, and it's a hobby that they consider marketing, right? So there's podcast guesting, which is just, I'm going to go on lots of random shows, have great conversations with interesting people. There's no point to it, right? It's just sort of conversations. And there was that platform during COVID. Now I can't think of what it was called. It just slipped my mind. But you just go on there and have conversations with random people. We had lots of
Clubhouse. Was that Clubhouse?
That was Clubhouse.
It was the biggest thing since sliced bread, and then nothing.
Because we didn't have time just to talk. And I think that's what certain people do with podcast guesting. It's like there's no point to it. So I always look at it as podcast interview marketing. Why are you there? What value do you have to offer them? What do you want to do this? Right? What are you trying to get out of it? So I think if you start with the strategy, you can take podcast guesting from just being a hobby to actually being an incredibly powerful marketing channel.
And when you're saying, do it as a strategy and be very intentional about it, and obviously ask that question why to kick you off. Why do you want to embark on this? And to do it properly. We're talking about doing it properly, doing it over a long period of time, and doing it as a professional. So that's just doing a lay of the land there. In terms of doing it properly, and I'm doing air quotes, that takes in a lot of things. So that takes in the types of podcasts you pitch to, how the pitch is structured, what you do beforehand to build your presence. So if the podcast host does their homework, they can, check you out, because they're going to check you out. It's the pitch, it's the idea. Why don't we walk through what doing it properly at a top line level, and then we can go deeper on some of those elements.
Well, let's start with who you want to talk with, right? Who are your super consumers that will resonate with you or talk about and will tell other people about it, right? The vast majority of the world doesn't want to hear you. But there are those people that you can speak to their problem. You can add value to that. So the first thing is start with the podcasts that make a difference, right? And say, how do I find those? Well, you can ask your clients which ones they listen to. You can do a Google search. You can ask ChatGPT, right? You can also license a lot of the databases that will tell you that, right? Ones that will say, everyone that talks about professional services, these are the podcasts they listen to. So start with those. And another thing that I reject is this idea of more is better. I believe better is better. So there's a lot of people that'll say, I'm going to start with my dream 1,000 podcasts and pitch them all, which just means spamming them, right? Yeah. Better to just pick a handful, right? Ones that you listen to, ones that you think you could add value to. And I always tell people, Gary Vaynerchuk said what? Jab, 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 right hook. I think it was one of his books.
That was one of his books.
Probably missed a couple jabs in there, but I always look at it as give, 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 ask, right? And so before you just reach out to a podcast host, give it a listen, right? Then after you listen to it, give a rating and review. Hosts are like everybody else. They listen for their name, right? They're gonna recognize that. They're gonna appreciate it. Then engage with them on social media. Say, Trevor, I love the Earn the Right podcast that Tom Schwab, he was a little bit different, but overall, I like the podcast, right? So they'll start to know who you are. Then you give them a reason to invite you, which is you reach out and you say, I think I have value that I could give to the audience, right? Here's a topic. Here's something I could talk about. It's not, I just wrote a book and want to use and abuse your audience, right? So you go out there and you do it in a professional way where you're trying to build a relationship. You'll find that your success rate is so much higher. And some people will say, well, that's not scalable. May not be scalable, but you know what? It's very effective. There's agencies out there that will tell you that they will pitch 3.5 million podcasts for you. I don't know how they can do this because there's only 400,000 podcasts currently active and 100,000 have guests, but they're going to pitch them all for you. And it's like, it's very efficient, but it's not effective. So that's that first step. Why don't we get a couple of podcasts that we can be on, right? And if you work with an agency, they can get it done so much quicker, right? Because they've got the data,
of course,
they've got the relationships. But if somebody's just looking to do it themselves, you can do that. Give a great interview. Be a gracious guest. Excuse me. And you will get invited to other podcasts. And here's a little tip. At the end of every podcast, thank the host. Say, I really enjoyed this, right? If I did a good job, do you know any other podcasts that I might be a good fit on? Because guess what? Hosts know hosts. And that old commercial, and it said something like, and they told two friends, and so on and so on and so on. It doesn't take but a handful of good appearances for you to get introduced to other ones, and you can get your dance card filled.
I like that. In terms of the types of podcasts, no doubt you have clients who want to be on Joe Rogan or the very big podcasts in their space. What do you recommend for those people?
More and more, I come to the realization that podcast interview marketing done right is a magnet, not a megaphone, right? And there's so many people that come and say, well, I want to be on Joe Rogan. Well, why? Right? Because he's famous, right? Today I heard somebody say that fame is the best business model. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard, right? You look at the Forbes billionaires, you probably don't know most of them in there. They're not famous,
good call.
but they are very, very successful, right? And the flip side is you got a lot of famous people that are just famous for being famous. So look at it and saying, what impact do you want to make on this? So I'll always push back on people and say, you want to get in front of the right people, not just more people, right? You could get an ad on the Super Bowl and get in front of lots and lots of people. Doesn't mean it's going to help your business, right? If it's just about exposure, go streaking, right? Everybody will see you, but I don't think it's going to help your business.
And I mean, it's the thing too. I mean, appearing on other people's podcasts should not be an ego thing. I mean, it should be it's about building authority, but it's not just about you. It's actually, this is the thing where probably some experts, leaders or whatever, they think it's about them and I will get on podcasts, but really it's about the audience that you want to move with your ideas and share your stories with. And if you're dealing with a podcast host, you've got to think about them and their audience, not you and your message.
One of the best compliments I ever got from my business, and this was my last business, I was covering the phones one day, and a happy customer called up and he said, "You guys are great. You're just like Preparation H." Now, I don't know if you got Preparation H in Australia. It's hemorrhoid cream in the U.S.
Oh, okay.
And I stopped and I'm like, "Excuse me, we're like hemorrhoid cream?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's a compliment, right?" He said, "You came recommended. You gave me fast relief." And it was at that point that I realized nobody cares about our product or service, right? They care about their pain, and especially the pain in the rear end. And so I think too many people in marketing and copywriting, they are so excited with their features and benefits and the shiny object, right? One of the things that we teach our clients is that foundational first question where people will say, "So Trevor, tell us about yourself." And people will go on this long biography, right? Nobody wants your CV. They don't care when you went to school, all the rest of this. What they want to know is, what problem can you solve? What do you believe about that? Once you start talking about that, then you can bring in your expertise. The reason I feel this way is because I've got this experience and this is what I have done. But this should not be an ego thing.
So picking the right shows really, and don't worry about the size of it. Worry about earning your chops. Worry about getting on the show, adding it to the list that, your body of work. And to be a good guest takes time. I mean, it's like anything, whether you're going out to speak or whether you want to be a writer or even a podcaster, you get better as you go along if you take it seriously.
You do. And I think of even, theater in the United States, there's this thing of off-Broadway. I don't care how famous you are, you don't open the play on Broadway, right? They do other ones to get ready for it. And the one thing that I would put an asterisk on is the dirty little secret in podcasting is that 80% of podcasts die within the first 10 episodes, right? Doing a podcast can be work. It's tough. It's a commitment. So just make sure that if you go on a podcast, make sure it's been around a little bit, because you don't want to be guest number 8 and they stop publishing at number 9, right? Because no one will ever hear you there. The other thing too is that as a new guest, you're going to have a new host there, and it's going to be really hard. It's going to be sort of like the blind leading the blind. Whereas if you can go on somebody that understands it a little bit more, you'll have a much better interview.
Yep. So in terms of, let's look at the pitch. So you've already set the scene earlier about, building a tie, building a bond, building a relationship of sorts with a podcast host in a genuine. We're always talking about doing things in a genuine way, connecting with them in LinkedIn. If you've listened to one of their podcast episodes and genuinely liked it, let them know. That side of things. I mean, being part of their world is always a positive thing. But then when it comes to the pitch, and usually, with podcasts, the bigger ones have a producer, but by and large, most are run by the host themselves. And that's why they're always after, they've got a day gig as well, or they're running their own business and they're pretty busy anyway. So anything you can do to make it easy for them, they are often looking for really great guests. So your job is to make it really easy for them to say, yes, let's get you on. So email is probably the way it's going to, albeit you can pitch, a DM on LinkedIn or X or Twitter if they're there. But how do you suggest you pitch the idea? Is it a one idea that you go in with? Is it the credibility you go in with? How do you guys do it?
I think it's standing out, right? And I don't like the word pitch. I know where it comes from. You pitch an idea, you pitch a story, but too many people are pitching human beings, and it's dehumanizing. I like introduce, right? So how do I introduce myself? How do I introduce the idea that we could talk about? And if you make it more human there, that's a great place to start. And I'm a big fan of AI, right? AI should be a tool to help us, not replace us. So look and ask Claude or whatever, tell me about Earn the Right. Look at their podcast. Look at me. Where are similarities that we could do? Then make it very easy for the host. Like you said, remember, most of us are probably creating from a desktop, and the host is probably reading from their mobile device. So shorter is better, right? It doesn't have to all be done in one long email. There's this thing called proof of life right now in marketing, right? How do I know it's really Trevor and not AI saying it's Trevor? One of the things that we use a lot of times is a quick Loom video. Or if you're on Google, you can use Google Vids for free right now. Send them a quick video, right? It's hard to ignore a video when you get it in a text, or a video when it comes across in an email. There's no doubt it's you, right? And make sure you connect the dots for them. The podcasters are busy people. Like you said, you've got lots of things. You've got lots of different emails to go through. So put value at the very beginning, and then invite the follow-up on how we can talk about this, how we can make it happen, what other information do you need. You can always put links, right? Make it easy for them. Put a link to your website, put a link to your book, a link to your LinkedIn, all of those things, so that they can easily, even from their phone, look and say, Tom is legitimate. Because Trevor, you said before, they're going to do that. Because before someone introduces you to their audience, they're going to do a little bit of a background check almost, right? A sniff test, right? And they're going to want to make sure that you're legitimate before they start introducing you to their friends.
As a podcaster, we put in a fair bit of effort in doing that, and it really, a lot of it is also gut feel. I mean, you can tell, and they are pitches, you can tell a pitch that's just going out the same to everyone, or it's disingenuous. There are a lot of pitches that are disingenuous. And yes, I do like an email introduction versus the hardcore pitch. I think the nuance of that should be noted. But the thing is, a lot of pitchers will say, I listened to this and blah, blah, blah. And, they didn't listen at all because their pitch is entirely wrong. So that's not a great way of, a lot of the people saying, the cold callers, the cold emailers, the cold people, they always say, try and find something in common with the person you're sending it to. And you know damn well that it's disingenuous and they've never listened to the show. What do you say? It's one thing about introducing yourself. Do you like going in with like with a journalist, you go in with a storyline idea? With an interview podcast, you'd go in with a topic that will resonate, and for these reasons you think it will resonate? Do you go in with one big idea or a number of different ones?
I go in with one big, strong idea, right? And if they say no to the idea, you can always come back with another one. If you just come in and say, do you like me? Do you want me to be on your podcast? That's a yes-no thing. And it becomes very tough because they don't know you, right? And if you're going to make them connect the dots, some of them are so generic, right? Tom is an entrepreneur. Well, what does that mean, right? Nothing, right? And the podcast host is not going to go in there and try to connect the dots if they don't know you. So make it easy for them to say yes. Other things that we started to do, right on the one sheet, and a one sheet is like a boiled down media kit for podcast hosts, right? You don't want to give them a big 15-page media kit. Give them one page that says, this is who you are, this is your picture, here's your social media logos, here's different topics you could talk about, a little bit of bio, a third-person rip and read introduction. We started putting this seal on that said, committed to collaborative promotion, right? If you stay at the very beginning, I'm looking forward to, I promote all my podcast interviews. That's a big thing to a host. Even sometimes I've seen people, when they put their picture up there, they'll put their picture in front of the microphone. And it's like, oh, good. Now I know the person has professional equipment. And so little things like that. You want to give people a reason to say yes, not just filter you out very quickly.
And I can attest to the media sheet, and coming from a PR background, we've always sort of done media kits, I suppose. The one pager is gold when done well. I know that the Interview Valet media sheet's very succinct, and you get a little bit of wriggle room with what they look like, but really it's a snapshot. In 5 seconds, the reader can get a good handle on you. And yes, there's a little bit of bio, the right links, all of that sort of stuff. Sometimes, not all the time, but I think some of yours, and certainly the ones that I've got, have received in the past, they've got some suggested talking points. Other times they might have topic ideas. So you go in with one topic in the email, but people who go a bit deeper and read your one pager can see, there's other topics etc. And a lot of hosts will, you've used the word a couple of times, collaboration. They will collaborate. The idea might sound reasonably strong, but you, as a podcast host, you want to move it in a different direction, and you've looked at their background and say, actually, I wouldn't mind doing this, this, and this. What do you think? I had one recently where the person had, there was a lot of good ideas, and I said to him, we could probably break this into two, do one interview and make 2 episodes, because there were 2 clear different areas. Funnily enough, I've tried, sometimes people will pitch you and then you say, look, this is a little off, but I wouldn't mind going down this path. And, can we work on that? And you don't hear back from them. I mean, this is the problem when you've got people pitching on your behalf. You've got to trust them that they will go back and collaborate with the podcaster, because I've had a few that actually don't come back to you, and you've opened the door to a broader conversation and a collaboration. So that's a little tip. But if you're doing it yourself, always get back and collaborate with the podcast host, because if between you'll get the right answer, which is again right for the audience, and that's what we're trying to do, is make it right for the podcaster's audience.
And sometimes people say, what makes a great podcast guest? And I'm like, forget the word podcast. Think of yourself as a guest, right? What makes a great guest? Being gracious, showing up on time, saying thank you afterwards. All those little things can set you apart, because with AI right now, the bar can be so low. I'm guarantee you probably get emails that say, Dear Trevor, Dear Young Trevor, Dear Earn the Right, right? All of these things where they're just scraping it, and it's just a quick no. So if you can be a great guest, you'll get invited back. You'll get promoted. You'll get introduced to other people. And we've seen clients that have come to us that have either tried to do it poorly by themselves, or, have been represented by somebody that did them a disservice. And they had a very, very hard time in podcasting after that, right? Because as a host looks at you, they're going to look at your social media. And if you haven't promoted or mentioned any of your last 20 interviews, what makes you think that you're going to promote theirs? And so I can think of one client that came to us, and the agency they were working with just got him on lots of random podcasts, and no reputable podcaster wanted to talk to him after that.
Yeah. It's a good point you raise about the promotion. And this is again why podcast guesting, I think, is an amazing strategy, because there's a ripple effect if you do it well. I'm not one to set and forget, but as the podcaster themselves, you want them to be out, maybe they're doing some video clips, maybe they're, promoting, writing up an article off the back of the interview and putting that up on Substack, whatever it is. But what do you think what are some of the things that you expect your guests to, not your guests, but your clients, when they appear on a podcast, what are the things you want them to do to promote that they've been on that podcast?
At a very bare minimum, they should be engaging with the host and the audience afterwards. So when the host goes and publishes that the interview goes live, right, they're going to tag you in it. You should go in there and at that point, like it, comment about it, be there to answer people's questions, maybe repost it. I always do different clips, right, so that we've got twice as much stuff out there, because that's important. Because if you thought it was good enough that you're going to give up an hour of your life to talk to somebody and their audience, why wouldn't you want to stay in front of them and build that relationship? I think there's too many people that are using it as a transaction, and it becomes icky. Is the nicest way I can say of it, right? And you can feel like you and your audience are abused by it. It's like, no, let's start a great relationship here, because you'll get invited back on. Other people from your company might get invited on. You could be invited to speak at their conference, right? All of those things. So find ways to stay in front of them with that. And the other thing is that podcasts have a long shelf life to them. right? It'll go on for years. Don't just promote it 1 week and then think, oh, I'm on to the next one. Today, it's so easy to schedule posts, right? So if you did a post about what a great interview it was on Earn the Right, right? It was like a master class of how to do podcast interviews correctly. Well, just don't put that out the week that it goes live. Maybe put it out once a quarter, right? Have it scheduled to go back out there. Nobody's going to remember that, hey, this is the same post that you did 6 months ago. No, it's good content. And when you're tagging the host in there, it's reminding them. And I'm always amazed how hosts can be great referral partners, right? They'll send people your way, or you tag them and you're top of mind. Guess who they talk about in their next podcast? You know, hey, I was just talking with Trevor Young the other day, and it reminded me, we did his podcast, last January, and this idea of rolling thunder is such a powerful concept, and it brings it top of mind again. And the best, I think, marketers, the best podcast guests do that, right? And if you're a gracious guest, you get invited back. You get invited to other things. If you're a rude guest, I don't care if this is a dinner guest, going to a cocktail party or whatever, or a podcast, it'll get known and you won't get any more invitations.
Can agree with that 110%. And when you're saying, it can be the gift that keeps on giving, because these are earned media assets. You get one asset, which is the interview, but out of those interviews, particularly now, we can get a transcript of it and break that down this is where AI can help you to break that down into social media posts that you review and, edit as required. But it's your voice and your words and your ideas and your insights and your stories that AI is grabbing. And so that transcript is really important to, and you could write an article on what you've done. You can write an article off an interview that you've done and put it on your blog or Substack. I mean, there's so many ways to slice and dice, and a lot of podcasters do videos for sure, and do the video snippets using a tool like Opus Clips is one, and Riverside allow you to do it, or they might do it manually and get someone to edit it manually. They'll put those out. You can share those, and maybe you ask the host, have you got a few of those clips that I can share with my audience? Just ask, and they'll probably hand them over, and it helps them get more reach for their podcast, which is really what they want. So it's it's not a set and forget. You've got a lot of assets off this one big asset. Let's go with it. You've alluded to a number of times about, I guess, the host talking about you in other episodes or amongst their networks or whatever when they're promoting your episode. Talk to us about this borrowed credibility, or what I've called in the past authority transfer, or implied third-party endorsement, or not even implied, it is third-party endorsement. It's implied third-party endorsement when a podcaster has you on as a guest, and when they continually talk you up elsewhere, that is definite third-party endorsement. That's if they're seen as credible people, you're going to be seen as a credible person. How important is that?
Oh, you were the one that taught me the phrase, the transfer of authority, right? I've always felt it, and that's what it is, but you get the credibility from the host, because your audience, nobody came here today and said, wow, Tom Schwab is going to be on this podcast. They had no idea who I was, but they knew Trevor, and they're like, I trust him, and if he brings on somebody, I trust that they'll be good, right? So you've almost got that. You vouched for me, or you vouched for all the guests. And I think too many people try to prove themselves. It's like, no, if Trevor says you're good, right? So there's that transfer of authority there. And it's not only from a personal aspect, but it also goes into the algorithms, right? Because an SEO link, right? Okay, you're passing your authority to my website. AI, you get more credibility being on someone else's podcast than to do your own. Because what I say about myself on my platform doesn't matter as much as what's said about me on another platform. So there's that transfer of authority there. Even when you're repurposing, we've been taught this by some of our clients. When you do a clip, don't just put yourself there talking, right? It could be a talking head, right? It could be what you say about you. No, give the host a little bit of, they ask you the question, then you give the answer. Because not only does it prove that this was a real interview, but when they index it through facial recognition, whatever, they realize, oh, this goes to Trevor's audience and this goes to Tom's audience. So I think it's one of these things that is basic, right? I think back in the day, right, you'd go to the country club, because if you remember, okay, you've got credibility with that, or you speak at the Kiwanis Club, right? Or back in the days when as seen on TV, people would buy stuff just because it was as seen on TV. It's the same thing here. Even on social media, we call it the as seen on image, right? When we promote this episode, I guarantee you there's going to be a picture of me, Trevor, and it will have the Interview Valet logo on it someplace and the Earn the Right logo someplace, right? So all of a sudden it's like, if you like this, if you trust this, you should trust this too. And I think today especially, we're not talking about attention anymore. We're talking about trust. Attention is easy. Content is free. But trust is what drives the business.
100%, 110% on that one, Tom. Tom, in terms of the frequency, we've talked about there are people that just want to be on all shows and they just blast it out there rather than less is more and doing more with what you've got, which hopefully listeners have picked up on the fact that that's our philosophy. We both think that way. But what would be a good frequency for someone who wants to get into the rhythm of being on other people's podcasts, bearing in mind that you might do an interview one day and it might not get up, for 2 or 3 months sometimes. But what's a good frequency to give people? Because it's a compounding thing. It's the body of work that I keep talking about, that over time, is 12 in a year good? Is 6 in a year? Should people be shooting for 24? Or the number doesn't matter? Just get that rhythm going and do more with what you do.
Yeah, I think what our clients have told us over a decade is when they did fewer than 2 a month, it was like reinventing the wheel. Every time was awkward for them. So I think if you get in that routine, and you'll get more comfortable with it, you'll get better, right? You've got to get those at-bats, if you will. But I'll also push back. I don't think you want to do more than, on average, 1 great podcast a week. Right? And some people will come back and say, well, if 1 a week is good, let's do 1 a day. They're all going to be the same interview, right? The Groundhog's Day interview. You're not going to be able to promote them. You're not going to be able to have different content there. And it used to be and I'm embarrassed by this. And at one time, it was about 10 years ago, I tried to get the Guinness Book of World Records for the most interviewed person. They didn't have the category, and I am so glad that I didn't get that, right? Because it was early on. It was probably 2014, and I'm like, I'll be famous. Everybody will hear me. And it was just a joke because it looked like you were so desperate that you would talk anywhere. And so I think today it's more quality over quantity. And you don't want to look like a desperate guest. It's almost the same thing of like blogs, right? There's certain people that say, I did a great weekly blog every week last year. That's impressive. But if you say, I did a daily blog and it was the same blog every day, that's comical. And that's unfortunately what a lot of people are doing and even being taught to do. You just go out there and just keep telling your story, and sooner or later somebody will buy. That's people that are selling interviews and trying to sell activity as opposed to results.
I once had someone pitch me, and their main pitch was that they'd been on over 100 podcasts in 6 or 8 months or whatever. And I thought, well, you've been everywhere. I don't want to talk to you. I mean, it was the most me, ego-driven trip I've ever seen. And everything was, all the awards this person had done, they'd called themselves visionary and thought leader. And I thought, well, there's red flags popping up all over the place. Conscious of time, Tom, and thank you for sharing your wisdom on this very important topic that I think. So there is a lot involved. Let's just summarize. There's the before, the during, which is the interview itself, and then the after. So let's just look at that let's top line summarize the things to do beforehand, the things to do of the day once you got it, and then afterwards, which is just as important. Let's start at the start. The key points that people need to take in.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it too complicated, right? It's like golf. Golf is a simple game, but it's not easy, right? You want to do it the right way. So the first one is make sure you know why you're doing it and who you want to talk to.
Yep.
Start with the end in mind. Next, be very strategic in the podcast you reach out to. Build it as a relationship. When you get on there, be a great guest, right? Be adding value. Then afterwards, be a great guest by promoting the episode, right? Building that relationship. And it's not magic. It's not a secret. If you do that, right, with the right heart, with the right consistency, you will get results, right? This is one marketing where I'm like, even if you don't, hit it out of the park, you're going to have social media followers that hear you. You're going to have this content to reproduce. You're going to have, leads that are self-selected. You're going to have AI that's indexing you. There's all these things that you're going to get out of it. So start and continue to get better.
In that middle bit about being the guest itself, what's your view on preparation versus being spontaneous? I feel you should be prepared, but not overly prepared, and you should understand the show very well and where that podcast host is coming from, but not be overly prepared so every message is rehearsed.
Exactly. And I look at that more in the targeting phase to get to know the podcast. And you should always already know your content, right? They're only going to talk to you about your area of expertise. If you notice, Trevor hasn't asked me my opinion on macroeconomic forces, right? I have no
That's
opinions.
my next question. I
have no opinions, and if I did, nobody would care about them. So they're not going to give you gotcha questions. Where you really have to prepare is to understand the party that you're going to, right?
Yep.
What's the tone? Listen to that. What's their beliefs? How does the podcast flow? Just same way, like if you go to any other event, right? If I get invited to speak at Trevor's event, right? I'm going to find out where is it, what time is it, what's the dress code, who's on before me, who's going to be on after me. Those things where I'm finding out about the host and what that is. I already know my content. So from that standpoint, that's part of being a gracious guest.
And what do you think about, often guests will allow you to, where can we find this person, or send them to somewhere, or a call to action. Often, not all the time, but often. What's your take on how you should handle that side of things?
Know it's coming, right? There's two things, how it starts and how it ends. So that first question, how are you going to answer that? And then that last question, often it is, so Trevor, tell us about yourself. So where can people find you? Make sure that you know what to do. And we've done testing on this, right? HubSpot's looked at the data. You should always send them to one place, right? So make it easy for them. Often you can make a page for every podcast, right? We call it a welcome page. And then tell them what they'll find there, right? Don't just buy my book or, don't make it a take it or leave it. Once again, make it easy. Tell them where to go. tell them what they'll find there, right? You were nice enough to answer or mention my book. You can buy it on Amazon, but if you go back, I'll give you a copy of it, right? There's an assessment there, and tell people they can find your social media there. So tell them where to go, tell them what they'll find there, and then tell them where to go again.
Fantastic. And we just summarised. Thank you, Tom. The actual thing and the post. What's that middle bit called? I'm not sure. Pre, whatever it is, and the post. There is a pre, and this is my bang, the drum that I bang, and that is have your body of work out there. Have your podcast. Not whether you've got a podcast or your blog or your Substack or your a thriving LinkedIn feed. Make sure that you can be found, and make sure that your views, your opinions, your perspectives, your stories, your insights, your ideas come through that content. So make sure you've built that presence, that footprint, that digital footprint, that credible digital footprint, so the podcast host can find you and get a really good handle on who you are and what you're all about. Because that is important, because if they can't, they're out. There ain't no interview.
You are who Google says you are. And I think we had a client, or prospective client, come to us, and the man was amazing. He ran the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, basically the CIA for the military. And he had a book that he wrote under a pseudonym. And imagine this, he and his family had no social media, no presence on there. I talked with him and I'm like, this sounds amazing, but there is no one in podcasting that would have you on, right? They want to know who they're talking to, that they can check you out before they introduce you to their audience, right? And I think there's some podcasts that when I was in the military, I had a security clearance. And to get onto some podcasts, I think the test is higher than some of the security clearances, because they're vouching for you, right? If something comes up bad about you, that reflects poorly on them too.
Indeed. So, Tom, where can people find you? Where are you going to send them?
Let's give an example here, right? So here's the best way to do it. And you can go here, if nothing else, to see how you set up a welcome page. So tell people where to go. Go to interviewvalet.com/ETR for earn the right, right? Make it easy for people. When you go back there, there's a assessment, right? Will podcast interview marketing work for me? 10 easy questions, right? My book, you can get a free copy there. And if you'd like to talk with me, I'll put my calendar scheduling link there, all my social media, all of that will be back at interviewvalet.com/ETR.
Fantastic. There you go, folks. That's a pro at work. Go and check that out if nothing else. And yes, do reach out for Tom and connect with him on LinkedIn. Listen to his podcast, read the book, watch the TV series. Thanks, Tom. That's been wonderful and very meta, talking podcast guesting as a podcast guest. But I think I'll just reiterate what I said at the front end, is that I still think this is one of the best earned media opportunities for thought leaders, authors, consultants, expert founders, to get their voice out there, to build their online presence and to connect with more people online.
Yeah, it's getting more and more powerful, because today we're not only talking to people, we're talking to the AI that refers them.
Yes, it's not what Google says about you anymore, it's what ChatGPT says about you. All righty, thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you, Trevor.